we decided that it would be a good idea to let you see what one of those practice exam questions would look like. And this is actually a very short one. But it's very meaty for being short. And I want to walk through it with you as well. So this is not only just going to show you kind of what one looks like, but how would you abstract and get to the answer quickly. A CRC practice exam question. I'm going to go ahead and read it to you, and then I'm going to show you what the options are. We have, let me just scroll down a little bit. It's loading. Mrs. White is diagnosed with acute combined systolic congestive and diastolic congestive heart failure, which is due to hypertension with stage 5 chronic kidney disease. What ICD-10 codes are we going to code for this particular scenario? Now, these are the things that jump out at me. You're going to, when it's a practice exam, unlike a pre-employment exam, it's going to be multiple choice, right? So they're giving you the codes, right? And I like to say they know you know how to look up the codes. That's really not the hard part. But can you pick the proper codes following the guidelines, get them in the right order? That's a little different. So the things that jump out at this particular scenario is that we have something that's acute. Acute is a red flag term. The fact that the person has systolic and diastolic heart failure, congestive heart failure, that should be a red flag that there is a code for systolic congestive heart failure and there's a code for diastolic congestive heart failure. Is there a code for a combined? Maybe. And whenever you see the term due to, bam, red flag should be going all over the place because that is pertinent, right? There's a causal relationship there. Now, hypertension, okay, so we have a heart disorder going on with hypertension, but then they threw in CKD, right? And as with ICD-10, you probably already know that there is a causal relationship between hypertension and CKD. So there's all kinds of things going on with this scenario, right? And again, it's short and sweet. However, there's that one mistake can trip you up. So here's our choices. We're going to eyeball those choices for just a second, kind of look at them, and I'm going to tell you what my thought process is when I just look at these codes without looking them up yet in the tabular, okay? So again, 4 choices, kind of eyeballing them. Now let's scroll down here and let's see how my brain thinks. Okay, so the first thing I notice is that in 18.5 is all the same. So that tells me that that's a code I don't need to look up. I don't need to pay attention to that code right now. It's going to be the same on every single choice. Now, some people choose to draw a line through it so their brain doesn't keep looking at it. That's fine. But my eye automatically jumps to the Z99.2. I could rule out 2 of these really quickly if I look up Z99.2 to see if it's applicable. So are we going to be able to throw out A and C right away? Okay, that's one thing that that we've gotten down to 2 choices. So we've already saved a lot of time, right? Then the next thing I'm going to look at is, hey, each one of these has I 13.2, but I'm not going to draw a line through them like I did in 18.5 because the sequencing is different. All right, so that's pertinent. That tells me that they obviously want me to know, do I understand the sequencing between these codes? And then the code that's probably going to summate and give us the formal answer is the I50.42, and you notice that we have different characters after the point. So we've got 43, 43, 41, and 42. So again, let's see if we can narrow this down. Now, if you've done a lot of diagnosis coding and you're familiar with your ICD 10 manual, you don't have to have these codes memorized. Sometimes you will, but let's break down where they're found in the manuals, though. N codes tend to be revolving around, the genitourinary. Think of N for nephrology, kidneys. So without even looking this up, I'm going to assume this is the CKD code. And the fact that it ends in a 5, I just happen to know, and you can make a note of this, that stage 1 ends in a 1, stage 2, 2, 3, etc., etc. So I'm going to say this is CKD 5. Okay, then Z codes, I happen to know, are things that kind of help explain what's going on in the scenario. Chandra mentioned it earlier about the Z code that she was talking about. And so when I go back and I look up there, I'm thinking, I don't see anything that flashes Z code to me, because I'm thinking probably a status code, right? And so without looking this up, or if I look this up, I'm going to assume that it's a status code. And to be quite honest, it is a status code. Z99.2 is for dialysis. All right. Now, our patient, it's not stated that they're on dialysis. Right. So right there, I have knocked out A and C. So you would look it up. You wouldn't just know that it's Z992 is status dialysis. But when you did, you would say, okay, well, this patient isn't on dialysis. We're going to knock out A and we're going to knock out C right there. So now we're down to B and D. Now, I13.2 is in a different sequence on each of those, so I need to look up that code and see if there's any sequencing guidelines that are related to that. And then we also are given 2 separate choices, 0.41 and 0.43 for the I50 code. Now, backing up a little bit, I codes, if you remember, probably the first ICD-10 code that you learned or memorized was I10 for hypertension. And so the way I remember that all these little cardiology codes tend to be right there is because I think of the word ischemia. Okay, so let's see. Let's run real quick through my thought process. Z99.2 status code allowed us to knock out A and C. In 18.5, don't necessarily need to look it up because it's already on every single choice and in the same location, so I don't have to worry about that. It just happens to be for CKD 5. And codes that are I codes tend to be cardiology codes, and the I13.2 is in every choice. So again, now I just need to know the guidelines that surround these 2 codes. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and let you look at that. Now, some people, we actually talked about this, Lorraine and Chandra and I, the other day about, when you're bubble and highlighting or what you're doing while you're taking a test. Some people have said highlighting is something that they like to do, have multiple highlighting colors, and they will have, you can get one little highlighter that has several colors. And Lorraine had said, just keep all the caps off and know that by the end of the time you're taking your test, you're going to have to throw it away because it'll be all dried up. You can do that. I am really driven toward visual and color association, but that confuses me for the testing process. You got to be pretty good, and it can be a time taker. So I tend to use circles and squares and other things with a pencil. You need to develop what works best for you, and you do that by taking practice exams. Okay, so let's scroll down and see, do we know what the right answer is? Now, I could tell you what I think these codes are, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to down and look at the answer because that is a practice exam. Now let's look at the rationale or the explanation that we give you that goes with our practice exams, and you would get this explanation whether you got it correct or you got it wrong. All right, because even if you miss it, sometimes that's the best learning process because you're going to remember it. You're just, oh, that's what I didn't get. Okay, so the key words I already said was a specified type of CHF. That was a pertinent thing. Hypertension with stage 5 CKD. Okay, so the rationale here, which is, and I'll show you where the little tricky part is, because actually I looked at this one and I tried to kind of eyeball it and do it with, without looking up in the index or anything. I was just saying, oh, I picked this one, and I don't want to say Chandra caught me, but when I read the rationale, I was like, oh, I think I would have missed that one because I would have jumped to conclusion. So again, we're going to first look up failure, heart, diastolic, congestive, and then when you get there, there is a choice for combine, and congestive, systolic, and diastolic, and acute is always the right term, and that's going to give you I50.41. That's the proper code. Okay, so then when you look in the tabular, it's going to tell you, this is the key, that I50, which states to code first the heart failure due to hypertension with CKD, which is the I13 code. That's the tricky part. If you don't catch this, then your sequencing is going to be wrong. So that question was specifically written to see all those other things, but do you know the sequencing? Do you know to read the guidelines that tell you which code goes first? And then when you check in the tabular, it tells you to do 0.2 for the hypertension and the stage 5 chronic kidney disease. Then you go on down, we did the end 18.5. So ultimately our code, the correct answer is I13.2, I50.41, the chronic kidney code, and the Z99.2 is not used because the patient is not on dialysis. Now, before I stop talking here, I just want to give you a heads up. Do a little study on N18.5 because there are times that an N18.5 is on dialysis, and that changes the dynamics of some coding. So going back real quick, the answer was B. Let's look again at how this was divided up and kind of the way, this is the way my brain works, but you don't have to have codes memorized. You don't even have to necessarily know what code, what letter starts which area, but as you get familiar, as you make your annotations in your ICD-10 manual and you go through the chapters in a course, this is going to resonate with you and it's going to pop in your brain. Never assume anything. Don't ever go so fast, which is a big fault of mine, both assuming and going too fast, that you could slip up and make a mistake. All right? So I'm not saying, run through that quick. However, take the time to break it down before you even have looked up a code, and then kind of get an idea of where I think what do they want to make sure I know, all right? And then confirm it. Okay? Look everything up in the tabular. Don't guess ever. So there you go. That is what a practice CRC exam question looks like. Now, mind you, this is only the coding aspect. The CRC has so much more than just coding. In fact, it really doesn't have a whole lot of coding, in my opinion. But this is what one will look like. And in our risk adjustment live student calls every Wednesday night that we do for our full students, we go through these and break these down, and we'll be taking specific exam questions every week that are involved, not just the coding. Isn't that fun? I know that you're as thrilled as I am when you see something like that, but the Blitz is what's going to help you learn how to break down exam questions like this and make them pop.
The first question that we got is, what does CRC stand for? That is the Certified Risk Adjustment Coder. These practice exams that Alicia's talking about are practice exam questions. There are 2 practice exams that we have in development. They will be coming very soon. One is a free CRC practice exam, just like we do for the CPC and the COC. The other one will be a paid version, just like we have for the CPC and the COC. But the question that I got was, well, is there anything in the Blitz that talks about how strategies for these multiple choice questions? Yes, there is a section of the Blitz where Lorraine talks about how to take a multiple choice exam, that sort of thing. But there was also a conversation that Alicia and Lorene and some of the other instructors and I had earlier this week, and something we're kind of excited about is we do have in the plans to have a session that we record where we show each of us taking on the same question, so that you can see how differently we each think and how differently we each attack a question. And you can see that there's no wrong way or right way. It's whatever works for you and whatever, helps you get through it more quickly. So that is something that we've got in development, and it's coming on the way as well.
I forgot to tell, yeah, that's right. And that's going to be exciting for a lot of people because, again, I think we learn differently, but things, like Chandra said, different viewpoints, you may resonate more with one person than another. It's very exciting. There's always good stuff coming from CCO, isn't there?
Do you need more medical certification training? Go to www.cco.us. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for updates.